So you've sent over some really significant sources this week, and it's clear they touch on something quite sensitive.
Yeah.
We're going to dive straight into this meeting in Paris. You know, the one between French President Emmanuel Macron and the interim Syrian president, Ahmed al-Sharaa.
That's the one. Happened Wednesday, May 7th.
And it's really kicked up a lot of dust, hasn't it? So our mission today, really, is to unpack this. Why this meeting? Why right now? And, well, what are all the different takes on it?
Absolutely. And the first thing that just jumps out is how controversial it was right from the start. I mean, al-Sharaa being welcomed at the Elysée Palace by Macron. This is his first big trip to the West since, Assad fell back in December.
And the reaction was pretty much instant.
Oh, yeah. Instant and strong, especially from the French right and the far right. Big criticisms.
Right, I saw that. Marine Le Pen talking about stupor and consternation. Strong words.
Very strong. And Laurent Wauquiez was just as blunt, basically saying France shouldn't be rolling out the red carpet for former terrorists from groups that want to attack France.
And that really gets to the heart of the objection for many, doesn't it? Al-Sharaa's past as a jihadist.
That's exactly it. That's a core issue.
Yeah.
And to really get why the criticism is so fierce, you have to look at the context in Syria right after Assad's fall.
Okay.
The sources, they talk about these horrific massacres back in March. Western Syria, about 1,700 people killed, mostly Alawites. It's grim reading.
Yeah.
And then you have more recent clashes involving Druze communities. Plus, NGOs reporting abuses. It all raises questions, about whether the new authorities can actually control some of these extremist fighters linked to them.
And this backdrop, it wasn't just abstract political debate in France. People were actually protesting in Paris on the same day as the meeting.
That's right. Dozens of people. Syrian minorities, Alawites, Druze, Christians, even some Sunnis. All there, under the Syrian flag.
What were they saying?
Well, the chants were very specific. Jolani dégage. Dégage de France. Dégage de Syrie. They were using al-Sharaa's old name, Jolani.
Wow, that's direct.
Really direct. It shows the fear, the lack of trust. There was this quote from Issa Ali. He's with the Franco-Alawite Collective. He organized the protest. He said something like, it's not because one has changed clothes that one has become someone respectable.
That cuts deep. Okay, so you've got this really intense backlash driven by, well, recent violence in al-Sharaa's history. So why? Why did Macron's government do it? What's their side of the story?
Well, the official statement from the Elysée, it frames the invitation as being about helping the transition, towards a free, stable, sovereign Syria that respects everyone.
So nation building, essentially.
Kind of, and they were very clear. They weren't being naive. They said they know about the past of some of these Syrian leaders.
Acknowledging the elephant in the room then. But they also insisted on, what was it, no complacency with terrorists.
Exactly. No complacency with terrorist movements. That was the phrase. And the French presidency said Macron planned to really push al-Sharaa on accountability.
Accountability for what specifically?
For making sure the fight against impunity is a reality. That people responsible for exactions against civilians are actually brought to justice, judged.
Okay.
And they stress their top priority is protecting all civilians. Doesn't matter their origin, doesn't matter their religion.
It sounds like they're trying to walk an incredibly fine line. Engage with someone controversial, hope for stability, but also demand justice and safety guarantees. It's tricky.
Very tricky. And if you broaden the view a bit, look at the geopolitics, the French foreign minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, he gave more reasons.
Right. What was his argument?
He basically said not talking to the new authorities would be irresponsible vis-a-vis the French. Yeah. Irresponsible to French citizens.
How so?
His point was it could let Syria become, I think the phrase was, a red carpet for Daesh, basically creating a vacuum ISIS could fill.
So a direct national security argument for France. It's not just about Syria. It's about preventing threats closer to home.
Precisely. He tied Syria directly to things like fighting terrorism, controlling migration flows, drug trafficking, even the future of Lebanon next door.
So many interconnected issues.
Yeah, his view is you can't separate them. You have to engage, even if it's difficult.
It does make it sound very pragmatic, maybe even necessary from their perspective. But flip it around, what's in it for the new Syrian leadership? Why seek this meeting now?
Well, the timing is interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of international pressure on this Islamist coalition. They're clearly trying to let's say, present a more moderate, a more reassuring face to the world, the international community is watching, pushing them on, respecting freedoms, protecting minorities.
And this links back to sanctions, I imagine, the ones imposed under Assad?
Exactly. That's a huge piece of this puzzle. Lifting those sanctions could be transformative.
Because the economic situation is dire, right? I remember seeing that UN statistic. Something like 90% of Syrians below the poverty line after 14 years of war.
It's staggering, 90%. It just shows the incredible hardship. So, yeah, the incentive for the new authorities to get sanctions eased, to get some international legitimacy, it's enormous.
And for al-Sharaa himself, it's complicated too. He led Hayat Tahrir al-Sham,
Which used to be al-Qaeda's branch in Syria, yes. And he's still personally under UN travel ban.
So how did he even get to Paris?
France had to specifically ask the UN for a waiver, a derogation they called it, just for this visit.
That really highlights how sensitive this all is. France asking for an exception for someone still on a UN sanctions list?
It does. And France's position on sanctions is, well, nuanced. They seem to support lifting some of the EU's sectoral sanctions. They acknowledge the U.S. measures really weigh heavily on reconstruction efforts and attracting investment.
But they haven't pushed to get him off the main UN list.
No, not yet. They seem to think it's too soon for that. So they recognize the sanctions' impact, especially on ordinary people. But they're not ready to fully remove the pressure on the leadership itself.
It's that balancing act again. Pressure versus enabling recovery.
It really throws a spotlight on how sanctions work, or maybe don't work perfectly. They're meant to pressure regimes, but often it's the civilians who suffer most, like we're seeing in Syria. France is trying to navigate that very difficult reality.
Okay, so pulling this all together, this meeting, it's like a flashpoint. You've got the immediate political anger in France, you've got the terrible recent history in Syria, the very real geopolitical calculations, and this crushing economic desperation.
It's a real tangle, a tightrope walk, like you said earlier, for pretty much everyone involved.
And what it really boils down to, it seems, is this fundamental clash in diplomacy, especially after conflict. The practical need to talk versus the moral need for accountability.
Absolutely. You can completely understand the raw anger and suspicion from people who've suffered so much looking at al-Sharaa's past. But then you also have the French government arguing this engagement is necessary. Necessary to prevent things getting even worse, to protect their own interests.
It really forces you, the listener, to think about these uncomfortable choices in international relations. When you look at the suffering in Syria, the instability, the stakes involved, is talking to controversial figures, however unpleasant, sometimes a necessary step towards maybe finding some stability.
Or does doing that just end up legitimizing people potentially responsible for terrible things?
What?
Does it undermine justice?
It's that age-old question, isn't it? Where do you draw the line between pragmatism and principle on the world stage? A really tough one to answer.